Okay, welcome back. Hope everybody's doing well. In this video, I want to go over Ezekiel 18, another very commonly misused passage to teach that someone can lose their salvation. So let me begin by reading Ezekiel 18 and Ezekiel 33, which is a very closely related passage. So Ezekiel 18 verse 4 says, "The soul that sinneth, it shall die." Now this is the fundamental part from which this passage is misinterpreted. So it states as follows. It says, "The soul that sins shall die." Therefore, death here is a reference to going to hell. So the soul that sins shall go to hell. That's what they claim it means, which has very little textual evidence. I'll just outright state the correct interpretation. This correct interpretation is that the soul that sins in this context will physically die, and it's not a general principle applicable to general life, like the soul that sins. Like right now, if you sin, you're going to die like that. It's not about that. It's about excessive sin, and particularly judging Israel in this context for the wicked sins they were committing at that time, which still stands true as a general principle today, but it's not like if you sin once, then you die. That's not what it means. So let's keep going. In verse 21, it says, "If the wicked will turn from all his sins that he has committed and keep all my statutes and do that which is lawful and right, he shall surely live, he shall not die." Again, when the wicked man turns away from his wickedness that he has committed and does that which is lawful and right, he shall save his soul alive. That's another thing, save my soul alive. Does that mean like your immaterial essence going to heaven? No, it doesn't, but that's what people often assume without actually providing evidence. Now, Ezekiel 33, verses 12 to 15, or verse 13 first, it says, "When I say to the righteous that he shall surely live if he trusts in his own righteousness and commits iniquity, all his righteousness shall not be remembered. For his iniquity that he has committed, he shall die for it." Now, I'm going to skip, there's two plausible interpretations for this, but I'm just going to skip the one that I don't think is correct. So the interpretation I think is correct is if you sin, your life will be cut short on earth. It's a physical death. So let's explain why that's the case. Okay, it's more likely that the soul is merely in reference to the person, and that the passage may simply be referencing turning from sin to avoid God's punishment on earth, which includes imminent death, like it did for the Israelites in Hebrews 3, right? Deuteronomy 32 says that these Israelites, they disobeyed God. These Israelites believed, by the way, they were saved, including Moses, but Moses had to die on Mount Nebo along with the Israelites in the wilderness who sinned. They died and didn't get to enter into Canaan because of their sin, but they didn't go to hell. So, in fact, the Greek word psyche in Ezekiel 18:27 in the Septuagint, so the Greek word psyche is found in the Textus Receptus and Septuagint, and it overwhelmingly does not reference one's eternal destiny. So the word soil, I don't know why I said soil, the word soul often just conveys the preservation of one's physical life or deliverance from affliction on earth. As in verse 27, "He shall save his soul alive." And I'll prove this with further evidence. So Ezekiel 18:29 to 32 indicate a contextual relation to the house of Israel. That's what Ezekiel is about. It's about God judging them according to their ways unless they turn from their sins. The whole book of Ezekiel is about God's judgment on Israel for the abominations that they were committing. They were sacrificing their children and doing other wicked things that it's not even really worth getting into detail about, but you understand the point. So most of these judgments in Ezekiel were contextually worldly punishments like famine, war, the sword, right? That's the metaphor of the sword is a reference to war. So in other words, God is inflicting physical punishment, ailment, like physical worldly punishment on people for their sinful deeds, like he did to the Israelites coming out of Egypt during the provocation. Now, this punishment can include death, as it does in Ezekiel 18, as it did for Moses and the Israelites. Now, Ezekiel 33 directly relates to the themes in chapter 18. In fact, it even quotes the same verbatim thing, like "save my soul alive," "save his soul from death." So let's go to Ezekiel 33 and show that this punishment is a physical sword, like physical death. It says, those who hear the warning will deliver his soul in verse 5, the first 5 verses. And verse 7 says this man, Ezekiel, this prophet, Ezekiel was sent to warn Israel. So the following verses after verse 7 relate to this form of warning prefaced at the beginning of Ezekiel 33. So let's read Ezekiel 33, 21 to 33. It says, the city is smitten. I'm just paraphrasing. I'm not reading every single verse. You can read that. Verse 21 says, the city is smitten, which means the city is destroyed. Verse 25, thus saith the Lord God, you eat with the blood, you lift up your eyes towards idols. So he's talking about them committing idolatry. You shed blood, and you shall possess the land. He says in a question, interrogatively, and you shall possess the land despite doing the sin. So that implies that the punishment is that they won't possess the land. That's the punishment, which means they'll be killed, right? Verse 27, thus saith the Lord God, as I live, surely they that are at waste shall fall by the sword, and him that is in an open field I will give to the beasts to be devoured. That's a physical punishment on earth. And they that shall be in forts and in the caves shall die of pestilence. That's physical death, illness. For I will lay the land most desolate, and the mountains of Israel shall be desolate, that none shall pass through. They shall know that I am the Lord when I have laid the land most desolate, because of the abominations I've committed. So the punishment for the sin, the abominations, is desolation. It's physical death, it's illness, sword, death, right? And when this comes to pass, they shall know that a prophet has been among them. So when they see this affliction occur, they'll know that Ezekiel was telling the truth. He was a prophet. His warning actually came to pass. So this context shows, it proves the death, save a soul from death. It proves it's about a smiting from God. Like God did to Sodom and Gomorrah, God would do the same to Israel for their transgressions. He would destroy them. This aligns perfectly with the rest of Ezekiel, discussing their sinful behavior, the consequences thereof. So pretty clear. Now regarding the word soul, that's a tricky thing. Like I just explained the word psyche. It does not refer to like going to heaven. In fact, in the vast majority of its instances, we see people being referred to as souls in Genesis 46:18, Exodus 31:14, Proverbs 11:30. Some verses even say the soul as the object of possession while referencing the individual, right? Like Genesis 12:13, 19:20, 27:19, 34:3, 46:15. It says man is a living soul. Genesis